Perhaps the wildest opening weekend in NCAA tournament history has completed. 16 over a 1 seed upset. 2 1 seeds headed home. Michigan State, North Carolina also returning with early exits. It was a wild one, unlike one I've ever really witnessed before. Kevin Sweeney, Brad Cavallero coming to you live from the CBB Central podcast, breaking this one all down because there's a lot we could touch on here. I think we could probably do a podcast for about 3 hours, 4 hours, just kind of touching on everything that went on. There's been so many compelling games, upsets, buzzer beaters. It was everything you really wanted in an opening weekend, Brad.
Yeah, certainly. There's so much stuff that even stuff that happened Saturday or Friday, you can't remember. But the one thing that you can definitely remember and will always remember from Friday is, that historic UMBC over UVA upset. I know I saw it was 21-21 at the half, and I switched to the game for the second half thinking, I will watch this game until Virginia pulls away, and then I'll switch back to Syracuse TCU. But obviously, quite the opposite outcome. So, Kevin, did you have any interesting takeaways from this super historic upset?
It was just wild, Brad. I was watching. I actually watched almost all 40 minutes just because I was like, you know what? I have a thing where I watch like 16-1s and 2-15s until they're blowouts, and then I just turn them off and switch to whatever else is on, because I think the other games on right at that point were like an 8-9 game, like things like that I wasn't that interested in. So I was like, you know what? Let's see what UMBC could do. And it was just unreal the way that Jairus Lyles and KJ Morrow played. Those guys are just so fun to watch with how they create. And when was the point that you believed it was going to happen? I was pretty early that I thought it would happen. I thought it could happen as soon as they hit they got fouled on the three and hit all three free throws to go up by 14 at, I think, the U16 media. That was kind of the moment where I was like, okay, this might happen. But I kind of spent the entire time watching it in the same way that I watched Michigan State versus Northwestern earlier this year. As a fan, I was pulling hard for UMBC, similar to the way I was pulling for my school, Northwestern, and I kept waiting for everything to crash down, and it just never did. UMBC just continued to play well, and Virginia just was bad. I think it's. Obviously, credit the world goes to UMBC because they played such a great game and they executed to a T, but Virginia was a shell of themselves on both ends of the floor, not only on offense but on defense, and certainly a sad way for that season to end. I know they played so hard this year and certainly had a case to go win a national title coming into this tournament. Just crazy stuff.
Yeah, especially because I think Virginia was just so tight in that second half where they realized, that they're not, they play such a slow pace that there's such a low margin for error. And they definitely knew it. They were so tight, especially on offense. They could feel that insurmountable pressure. And like in high school basketball, you feel some pressure when you're playing a bad team and they start hitting some shots. Imagine in the 1 versus 16 game in the NCAA tournament, where no 1-seed's ever lost before, and you have these guys that are knocking down these crazy threes. Jairus Lyles is getting to the rim at will, and it's all unraveling like right in front of your face, and it's like to feel that sort of pressure has to be like unfathomable.
Yeah, I think always in these upset ball games, it's kind of a matter of these little. I always find these little 4-0, 6-0 turn of events type plays where, there's a missed three or a turnover at one end and it turns into an open look at the other end. And it's kind of the way that the tide turns in this ball game. And I felt like UMBC did a really good job of avoiding those happening. I think it helped that Virginia didn't hit shots because there was a couple times there. I think there was a point where UMBC was up by 10 and Virginia got a good look, and then they didn't hit it, and then UMBC at the other end hit a three, and it just kind of exploded where it could have went the complete opposite direction where Virginia could kind of pull momentum there. I think the only time that Virginia really made a strong push where UMBC couldn't respond to it with a bucket, where with the crowd getting amped and things like that, was there was a right around the U8 media, and Ryan Odom just did a really good job of taking the timeout and not waiting till the media. I think Odom did this as well against Vermont, in their East championship game, where he was taking timeouts around the medias, not only to kind of quell momentum in the building, being in basically a road game, but also using that to give rest to these guys, because especially Lyles and more of those guys were expected to play almost all 40 minutes. You're not really using a deep bench when you're playing that type of game. You're riding the guys who've gotten you there. And so I thought Ryan Odom did a really tremendous job kind of managing the game in this one. I think he knew that they weren't going to go out there and score 80 on Virginia or try to push the pace, but they just executed so well in the half court. They spaced the floor really well. And then they hit threes. You knew they needed to. And I mean, if you look at the next time out against Kansas State, they got great looks. Like, in my opinion, UMBC outplayed Kansas State yesterday. UMBC just didn't hit enough open threes. Like, what was UMBC from the three yesterday? They went 6 of 22 from three. They could have easily hit 10 threes in that ball game. There was a lot of open looks that they missed. So, I mean, they just executed so well. I was so impressed with Ryan Odom, and he kind of ruled with a steel fist. He was so calm the entire game. You know, he even in the upset time, he wasn't going nuts at these guys. He was like, guys, stay in the moment. And I thought that was really, really a good change of pace. I mean, kind of the opposite of what Eric Musselman did. Both the good results this weekend.
It's a pretty funny, because I saw that, Ryan Odom before the NCAA tournament, people thought he was going to get the East Carolina job. But now, after this win, I mean, he should definitely not. He definitely should not settle for East Carolina. The worst job in the American Conference. And in terms of that second round game, that was, I think, the worst played game of the tournament. It was brutal to watch. UMBC and Kansas State. I know Cartier-Jara. He's been so good from that second half of the year when Kamal Stokes got hurt. He was unbelievably bad, just getting like his pocket picked multiple times, bad turnovers. It was just a sloppy back and forth, but turnovers and mistakes game. Both teams really exposed after dominating their first round game. I know Kansas State and Creighton, I watched most of that game, and Kansas State looked amazing. Creighton really never had a chance in that game. Kansas State proved to be the superior team and played exceptionally well. And obviously UMBC played exceptionally well against Virginia. And then both teams just had a dud in round two.
Yeah, I mean, that was a weird game. I tweeted afterwards that it was the most fun, terrible basketball game I've ever watched. I mean, it was terrible, but at the same time, like, it was excitingly terrible, because it was teams getting steals and getting runouts and obviously not finishing. But I mean, like, it wasn't like a game where teams were just like blatantly stalling and just going to work with 10 on the shot clock. At least there was action up and down. Just neither team could put the ball in the hoop. And then it's not like teams didn't have good looks. Like, neither team could hit an open three. It was kind of incredible. But yeah, I think the impact of this game, I think we should probably touch on that a little bit, just because it is the first 16-1 ever. I mean, on the UMBC side, I mean, not only does this change this season, it changes the entire program. It changes the entire school's, reputation. I mean, obviously we've seen in the past with schools like Stephen F. Austin and and Florida Gulf Coast, seeing like admissions rise big time and things like that. So, I mean, it's just program changing. It's career changing for a guy like Jarius Lyles, who's going to look to play pro basketball somewhere. It's career changing for a guy like Ryan Odom, who will be in the mix at bigger jobs. I could see him pretty much at any of the bigger openings, like UConn could be like a nice fit. Although I still think if you're UConn, you should go for a more established name, like a Tim Kluse or a John Becker, if you can, over Ryan Odom. Not saying Ryan Odom won't be a great coach, but obviously he's only done it for 2 years, and one game shouldn't kind of define a coach's legacy. But I mean, and then on the Virginia side, I mean, what's your takeaway from this season, Brad? I mean, it's just kind of unreal to think about this team that was so dominant through ACC play, that was so good when the going got rough and making plays late, bounces out like that.
So it's so foolish and so illogical, but it is true that your season success is pretty much only defined by your tournament success in a single elimination format, with so much randomness. So unfortunately, this 31-2 regular season, with an ACC regular season and tournament champ, with just this, dominating performance, is going to be remembered for this, terrible upset, and rightfully so. But I think the season is going to be deemed a failure. And would I necessarily deem it as a failure if I'm a Virginia fan? I would say no, because you got to experience this like that unbelievable ride where no one except for Kevin Sweeney thought you were going to be any good, and you ended up being the number one team in the country. And just because I hear a lot of people saying, like, oh, like the Pitt fans that were mad at Jamie Dixon for all the early exits. It's so much better to have an early exit than it is to not even be in contention at all. Like when it's like December 10th and your team has no shot of making the NCAA tournament, it's just so like deflating, I guess. It's so like demoralizing knowing that the rest of the season is kind of meaningless. So I would definitely say that it was worth it for Virginia fans to enjoy the success up to last Friday.
Yeah, I completely agree there. And I mean, this whole idea that I've seen from some people that like Tony Bennett ruined that game for Virginia, I just think that's ridiculous because, I mean, sure, he could have had a better plan, and sure, it seems like they may have looked over UMBC. It seems that, maybe Tony Bennett didn't make the in-game adjustments you would like to see, but their entire team imploded. I don't know what Tony Bennett could have done to make Ty Jerome. Ty Jerome looked terrible in that game. He was awful. He hurt that team with the way he played in terms of not only not as good defensively as he usually is, but taking bad shots, forcing things. Kyle Guy kind of fluctuated in and out of focus in that ball game. It seemed Devin Hall was quiet. I mean, it was just the entire team didn't show. And I mean, obviously you have to blame the coach in some regard for that, but I don't know what they could have done that would have, helped. I mean, Virginia just got flat out beat up. They got beat up on the boards. They got crushed on the glass by UMBC, who plays three dudes they play two really small guards, a 6'5" physical wing, a 6'6" skinny guy, and then either Daniel Akin, who's a freshman who's still skinny, or Max Curran, who's 6'9" skinny sophomore. Like, Virginia got beat up by these guys. It wasn't Tony Bennett's fault, and unfortunately, it becomes one of these things where until you've had tournament success, people kind of question you, and it's unfortunate because, I mean, we wait like Tom Izzo the last 3 years has lost to a 15 seed, a terrible Syracuse team, and then got an 8 seed in the other year. If a coach who hadn't had success before did that, they'd get criticized like crazy. If a Jay Wright before his Final Fours did that, or a Sean Miller, it's insane to me that people are that people start to question what Tony Bennett has done at Virginia when he just went 31-3 with a team that was not even in the preseason top 25.
No, it's crazy too. And there's so many like fallacies and like misconceptions around like Virginia's program. People say, oh, you can't win unless you have, these great recruits. But Virginia does have great recruits. Like Kyle Guy was a top 30 recruit. Ty Jerome was a top 40, I think, recruit. Giacchite was highly ranked. Hunter was top 70. Jay Huff was like top 50. Who like doesn't play, but he's a great long-term piece. So just the ideas around Virginia, there's just so many like falsehoods and like misconstrued facts and stuff that the narrative can really get out of control really quickly.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, and I think it's all these things of like, oh, Virginia can't score. Well, Virginia is like a top 30 offensive efficiency team in college basketball, or like, oh, Virginia against teams with more talent, Virginia struggles. Virginia just went 17-1 in the ACC and won an ACC tournament. They beat Duke. They beat North Carolina. They beat like at some point, like we have to like ditch this narrative that Virginia can't compete with the best. Like just because they had one bad game or they lost to Syracuse one year when Malachi Richardson went berserk. Like at some point, obviously this loss is going to hurt, and they're not going to fully disprove this until they go and make a run. And I thought this year was the one to do it, but I mean the future's still bright. I think DeAndre Hunter's wrist fracture probably keeps him from entering the draft.
Yeah, I would say, especially because next year is projected to be a weaker draft, and Hunter could definitely be a lottery pick. So Virginia should be a top 5 team again next year. I mean, Ty Jerome, Kyle Guy, DeAndre Hunter are all going to be juniors academically. Hunter will be a sophomore athletically. And then you have Giacchite, you have Jack Salt, who's a really good screener and like a defensive player. I think they are kind of missing another wing. Like if they could get like a grad transfer kind of 3-4 type of player who could really shoot the ball. This team could easily be number 1 again next year, but they're never going to shake this label.
No, they won't. I mean, they also have, in terms of their recruiting class for next year, they have the kid. They had the kid this year who barely played in terms of that combo 3-4, Francesco Badocci from, I believe, from Italy, who might be a guy who takes a bigger role. They also have Cody Statman as a shooting guard coming in, who is a pretty decent recruit for them, really good shooter. And then Kihei Clark is a kid who was undersized point guard who signed at UC Davis, who had committed to UC Davis and then blew up over the summer playing for Oakland Soldiers and got an offer from Xavier, went to Virginia instead. So, I mean, they'll certainly be back. I think we could kind of spend a whole podcast on this incredible upset, but I don't think we will. There's just so much to get into. Brad, I think the other team we need to talk about is kind of the story of the weekend, Loyola Chicago. This was a team that I've kind of been high on all season, if you've been following my Twitter account, and they did it somehow. They didn't play their best against Miami, found a way to win late on that incredible shot by Dante Ingram, the buzzer-beating 3. Then on Saturday, getting the win by 1 on that shot by Clayton Custer that hit every part of the rim and then went down. Just some incredible stuff. And I mean, I think this team can go to the Final Four. I'm gonna be very honest with you. Like I absolutely think they could beat Kentucky if they beat Nevada. Like I wouldn't be surprised if they went to the Final Four. Brad, Sister Jean's kind of the story of March Madness. She's an international sensation. What's kind of your thoughts on this Loyola team and how far can this team go?
Well, so first, I think the Final Four is definitely realistic. I think I would have them losing to Kentucky, but I mean, they have a matchup with Nevada, a team who needed overtime to beat Texas, and they were dead in the water against Texas. They were down 22 against Cincinnati. I had totally written off that game. When Nevada cut it to 10, I turned it back. But, this is a team that is probably the luckiest team right now, the Nevada Wolfpack, I mean, in terms of where they are in the NCAA tournament. 2 crazy comeback wins. And Loyola's had their fair share of luck too, where if Dante Ingram doesn't hit that shot against Miami, no one's even talking about Loyola. They're just a forgotten storyline. And then Tennessee, they kind of had Tennessee on the ropes for most of the game. Tennessee takes a late lead, and then Custer comes through with that last second shot. So this is two teams where you change like a small thing either way, and both these teams are just completely overlooked non-factors. And we have like a Tennessee versus Cincinnati game on Thursday.
Yeah, I mean, both teams have kind of had some unreal luck and some – I mean, they're really talented and they play kind of similar styles in that they embrace that pace and space. Check out my website tomorrow, guys. They should have something up about that. I'm looking forward to writing that piece up. But, I mean, I thought Loyola outplayed Tennessee for 39 minutes, had kind of that 1-minute spurt where Tennessee hit like 3 threes. But other than that, I thought Loyola was just flat out better. Andre Jackson played really well in this ball game. They shot 50% from the field, 40% from 3. Tennessee, I mean, Admiral Schofield was pretty awesome when he wasn't in foul trouble. That's another team that will be back, assuming that Grant Williams returns, which I can't see why he wouldn't. But it was just kind of nuts in terms of what Loyola did. And you touched on Nevada as well, Brad. I mean, that comeback yesterday was unreal. As you said, you turned it back on at 10 minutes. I kind of went to dinner when it was a 22-point game. I was kind of ignoring my phone because it was pretty low on battery. And then all of a sudden I get an alert that's like Nevada trying to complete a comeback, only down 3 with 4 minutes to go. And I'm like, what happened? So I tune in to the final bit of that. Just they're just unreal. They have such a clutch gene in them, and they compete. They're long and defend and rebound. Eric Musselman is such a good coach. Like, I mean, every school should want him. I think if I'm a Nevada fan, the one job I'm really scared about is if Arizona were to open, with obviously the controversy surrounding Sean Miller. I think that's the one that would really pique his interest. But right now they're going to Sweet 16. I think you can't really complain if you're a Nevada fan right now. You just kind of survive for another week in advance. And this team is, another team that I think could probably go to the Final Four. Like, they're playing Kentucky, who's inexperienced and can't hit threes. Like, everyone's written in Kentucky to the Final Four, but it's not exactly the easiest road. As I kind of said, yesterday in a tweet, I was like, if you put Illinois jerseys on Loyola and Cal jerseys on Nevada, no one would say this is the easy road for Kentucky. Like, they'd say it's easier, but it's just the names of these schools give people cause to overlook. But these are high major rosters.
No, definitely. Especially Nevada with all those transfers, like Caleb Martin. I had no idea how good he was going to be coming into this year. He was kind of a starter, but kind of a forgotten piece for NC State, and he hit a few huge threes in that comeback. One of the problems with Cincinnati and why I was kind of down on them all year was their point guard play, and so they kind of split the point guard position between Justin Jennifer and Kane Broome. And one of my big thoughts is, when you're a team and you don't obviously you can play multiple point guards together, like a team like Kansas with Frank Mason and Devontae Graham, had a ton of success playing the 2 point guards together. But when you have 2 point guards and you never play them together, that to me is indicative of a huge problem. Like with Cincinnati, they'll play like Justin Jennifer like 22 minutes and Kane Broome 18 minutes. In the game against Nevada, they combined the Broome and Jennifer combo for 3 assists to 2 turnovers, and were combined 2 for 11 from the field. And when Nevada was making that comeback, I know Justin Jennifer really over-penetrated one play, threw up kind of a runner that was a terrible shot with a lot of time on the shot clock. He gets pulled, and they put in Broome, and they still can't get anything on offense. And Broome ends up getting his game-winning floater attempt blocked or altered. So point guard was a real big concern for Cincinnati, and I think that is one of the reasons why they lost to Nevada.
Yeah, that's an excellent call. I've been kind of frustrated by that all year, and I kind of said it preseason as well. I was like, is Kane Broome the answer at point guard? He's kind of been that 6th man that we expected, but he's so small that you can't play him next to Jennifer against high-level competition. So it's just kind of a roster construction issue. And Mick Cronin, I don't think, did a very good job yesterday of managing kind of game pressure that was developing on them late. But, credit Nevada. Credit Josh Hall for taking that shot with 8 seconds left when they could have held for 1, having the look and just putting it up and on the rim. And imagine the criticism if he had missed that shot and Cincinnati went down to win the game. It would have been incredible.
Yeah, he was right in front of the rim though. It was probably an 8 or 10 footer.
Yeah.
And if you're going to pull off the upset, you have to be able to be willing to step out of your comfort zone and hit and take shots like that.
Yeah, and Hall's a great story because he was a guy who came in as a pretty good recruit for Eric Musselman, one of the few guys they've brought into the traditional high school market. And he's kind of went up and down throughout his first 2 seasons. He's had some issues where he's been lacking confidence, but down the stretch, he's played super well. And he's such a nice little glue piece because he's 6'6". He can shoot the 3. He can put it on the deck. He's long. He can defend. It's kind of the perfect mesh next to guys like Caleb Martin, guys like Cody Martin. It's nice. He's a nice little piece for a team that's trying to build toward building that pace and space method that Eric Musselman likes to deploy.
Yeah. So then another huge game that I saw a lot of people were very upset with on Twitter for the quality of the game, but I was very entertained, was the Syracuse-Michigan State game, where Syracuse, stymied Michigan State's offense and ended up getting a 2-point win despite one of their 2 guards on the whole team, Franklin Howard, fouls out with 6 minutes to go. He's an essential piece to the Syracuse, both offense and defense. They really need him on the court. I thought when that happened that Syracuse was done, but they ended up, staving off a comeback, a few tough shots from Tyus Battle, and Syracuse is moving on to the Sweet 16, despite almost unanimously people saying that they didn't even deserve to be in. So, Kevin, do you have any thoughts of this Syracuse-Michigan State game?
I was in and out on this one. I was stunned by Tom Izzo's game management. He was just, I can't comprehend why you're putting Ben Carter in the middle of a 2-3 zone at the high post. You have Miles Bridges, you have Jaren Jackson, who is in a bit of foul trouble. You have Josh Langford, all of whom are big enough and good enough passers to sit in the top of a zone and distribute out or attack it. And instead, they played Ben Carter there. They threw Xavier Tillman there. They even put Nick Ward up there for a couple of possessions. The fact that teams year after year are startled when they face the Syracuse zone makes no sense to me. I honestly think every team during summer workouts should prep for the zone and should have a game plan prepared to play a Syracuse zone in the NCAA tournament. I mean, it's insane to me that they struggled this much with it. I mean, and I think it kind of speaks to a larger issue this season that Tom Izzo had managing this roster. I don't think he did a great job of it. I think he was very much focused on, making sure that Jaren played his natural position and Miles Bridges played his natural position and Nick Ward played his natural position and Xavier Tillman got minutes because they didn't want to lose him to transfer type of thing. And Ben Carter's a senior and he needed to get some minutes. It felt like he was trying to give everyone time and, in a way that was acceptable. And we've seen John Calipari do this with guys like Julius Randle, making sure that those guys got to play in the role that they are going to play in their pro careers. But I just thought that Tom Izzo did a really bad job this season with that. And today was kind of a accumulation of that.
Yeah, I think you really hit the nail on the head, especially because, maybe Jackson is a natural 4 and maybe Bridges is a natural 3. But in the NBA, Bridges is going to play a lot of 4, and Jackson is definitely going to play a lot of 5. Jackson's 6'11", I think a 7'4" wingspan. Depending on where he's drafted, he may play exclusively at the 5. And, Michigan State, using guys like Ward and Tillman, while I like both of them a lot as players, Syracuse's length in the back of that zone, like with Pascal Chukwu, who's 7'2" with a 7'7" wingspan, he's really disruptive. And, Ward had like 4 turnovers. It just wasn't the best game to have players like Ward and Tillman, more of these like below the rim, back to the basket, inside scores. And in terms of Ben Carter, who got a ton of minutes in this game, 2 years ago, this would have been a perfect move. But Ben Carter is not the same player he was 2 or 3 years ago. He has had a ton of injuries. He missed all last year with a knee injury and really isn't back to form. The Ben Carter at Oregon or UNLV would be the perfect player to put in the middle of a 2-3 zone. But the Ben Carter now he's just not the same. So, going small, which I only think I saw Michigan State do in the Big Ten tournament with Bridges at the 4 and Jackson at the 5. I think that was such a no-brainer. But you're right, like his, wanting to, give everyone their playing time is kind of what did them in. I was always against that strategy of just like playing everyone just for the sake of it. I know that Roy Williams does it a ton at UNC. The time that I specifically was like banging my head against the wall when UNC was doing this was when James McAdoo came back to school unexpectedly. They had too many front court players. Williams would play Isaiah Hicks like 8 to 10 minutes a game at the 3, even though he just couldn't do anything out there. I was like, why? Just don't play this kid. Like, what are you doing? And then you fast forward 2 years later, and Isaiah Hicks is one of the best players in the country. He didn't transfer, and he probably developed a lot by getting those game minutes. So it is a sound long-term strategy, but I don't think that you can do that in a single elimination tournament. I think that's fine in the regular season, but when the tournament rolls around, you have to just play your best guys.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and I think Michigan State's roster is going to be really interesting to follow next year because I think it's pretty much a given that Miles Bridges and Jaren Jackson will be gone. Tum Tum Naren is graduating. Um, Nick Ward is a guy who I think a lot of people have floated that he may not return, whether that's transferring or staying, although he could certainly stay in Green. Ben Carter's gone. I think Xavier Tillman's going to be a really nice piece for them. Um, Cassius Winston and Langford, I think both probably stay another year, but Cassius Winston had a tremendous year. So, I mean, it's going to be really, really interesting to watch this roster develop. And you mentioned North Carolina, so let's kind of go to them. This was the game I was most stunned by, kind of other than UMBC, because of the way they did it. Texas, I mean, I was about to turn the game on, and I said to myself, Texas A&M might be able to give them some problems with their size, and North Carolina doesn't have any size. And man, was I right. And TJ Starks was awesome in this game. That was kind of my first takeaway. Robert Williams is kind of getting it all together, and their front court just manned UNC, and combine that with UNC going 6 for 31 from three. Texas A&M hitting 10 threes in this ball game. Just an impressive display. And a sad way for Theo Pinson and Joel Berry to go out.
Yeah, so I had UNC in my championship game. I watched this game until it was like 18-17 in the first half, and then I went to get dinner. I checked my phone, and I had a text from one of my friends that said, "Wow, Texas A&M is blowing out UNC." And then at that point, it was too out of hand to watch. But I was kind of disappointed watching this game because Providence was so close to beating Texas A&M, but Robert Williams and Tyler Davis were just too athletic and too big in that front court. And it seems like UNC had similar problems. Providence is a team that is better when they go small and play their wings, and UNC is a team that is better when they go small. And UNC went small. Providence tried to match Texas A&M big. UNC goes small and gets absolutely blown out of the gym. So that is something to monitor going forward with Texas A&M, especially because they have Michigan in their next game, and Wagner is not a physical player by any means. He's not a very good rebounder. And then Michigan likes to use Duncan Robinson at the 4 for most of the time, and he's not going to be able to play in that game because Robert Williams is just so athletic and so powerful. So you're going to need Isaiah Livers and John Teske to have really big games if Michigan is able to survive another round here in the Big Dance.
Yeah, and the bracket's kind of wide open for Texas A&M now. They'd still have to get by either Gonzaga or Florida State if they can beat Michigan. But as you said, I like the matchup there, so that'll be certainly interesting. Some more, let's kind of just whip around some talking points of the first 4 weekends. Brad, I think we've gone through all the craziest games. Buffalo destroys Arizona. Just kind of knocked them into submission. I mean, it was so impressive the way Buffalo played this ball game. They forced it into a guards game, and Buffalo had clearly better guards in that ball game than Arizona. Nate Oates is a great coach, and they're only going to get better. This team loses Wes Clark at point guard. That's a big loss, but they have a 4-star point guard coming in Rondo Segu, and a 4-star wing in Jonathan Williams, who's really talented, like a fringe top 100 kid. So Buffalo is going to be insanely good next year, and they just dominated Arizona. And I wouldn't be surprised at this point if that was the last game we see Sean Miller at Arizona.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was so striking how guys like Jeremy Harris, who was the number 2 JUCO player in the country last year, he was just able to get to the rim at will. I think Massenberg got a few threes. Clark was hitting step back jumpers. He was getting to the rim. It was just such a disjointed effort from Arizona, and many people have pointed this out, but Arizona's roster next year is absolutely gutted. The most experienced player is going to be Chase Jeter, the former Duke center. Their point guard is going to be Alex Barcello, who was not even in the rotation this year. He was like a borderline top 100 player. I think the player who played the most this year who's coming back is Dylan Smith, who's a 3-point shooter, but that's pretty much his whole game. So Arizona, I wouldn't say that they could be at the bottom of the Pac-12 next year, but they could definitely be in that like NIT glut that like we have this year. And if Sean Miller is either fired or leaves, who knows how many players are even left on Arizona. You know, they could have some Pitt-like roster attrition, which is kind of ironic because if Sean Miller were to leave, probably the most probable destination would be Pitt.
Yeah, I think they'll hit the grad transfer market hard if Sean Miller does stay for sure. I mean, I'd have to imagine they get involved with, the Ryan Taylors of the world and all these types of guys who can come in right away and play a role. I don't know if it'll be enough. My guess is they'll kind of, if Sean Miller's there for the long haul and they don't think they're going to get crushed by the NCAA, my guess is they kind of do what Oregon did this year, is hope for improvement from guys like Dylan Smith and Keanu Pinder, people like that, and also to bring in a grad transfer to maybe even 3 who can contribute right away, and then try to recruit enough where you're in that contention for an NCAA tournament bid. I think that's kind of the right strategy, and then hope to reload in 2019.
And then I've seen that multiple people have Brandon Randolph as like a future NBA prospect, and then Emmanuel Acott was a top 30 recruit. So I mean, they have the talent. They just need these players to really step up. I know one name of the sit out transfer market, who I saw that you had said on Twitter was linked to Arizona, was Mark Smith, who is the former Illinois wing. He's a late stock riser. He ended up as like a top 70 player in the country based on his senior season. And his phrasing was he didn't really fit at Illinois State, which I think is more code of I didn't play as much as I wanted to, and I think I deserve more minutes, so I'm going to transfer. So he could be an interesting option because he's clearly talented, and Arizona needs bodies, especially if they get a lot of grad transfers this year. Next year they're going to have to do it all over again. So getting a guy who's a sit 1, play 3 could be very valuable.
Smith's interesting because, as you said, I didn't fit this style that Brad Underwood plays. And I was like, you committed to Brad Underwood. Brad Underwood didn't magically change his style. If you didn't fit in an up and down style, then why did you go to Illinois? But I think he didn't fit in the sense of I'm not Thomas Walkup like everyone told me I'd be. Trent Frazier outplayed me significantly this year. To be honest, I don't think Mark Smith's very good. I mean, he's kind of a tweener, not really a guy who runs the show, but he can't shoot. I think a sit-out year could do him well. I don't think Arizona's the level for him, but Arizona will be desperate in a certain degree to fill scholarships with high-level talent, and so I could certainly see that as a good landing spot for him if that's the route he chooses to go. So yeah, it should be really interesting to see that roster get managed. Another kind of game/team I wanted to get into was Villanova. They dominated Alabama yesterday in the second half. Excuse me, that was Saturday that they did that. So everything kind of blending together on us. But they dominated Alabama in the second half. I turned this one off pretty early in the second half just because Villanova is one of the teams here where I feel like they can just flip a switch and just go nuts on you. That's what they did to Alabama. Jay Wright did a great job on Colin Sexton. I know he went for 17, 3 and 4, but he felt quieted. It felt like they made him work for everything he had to go get.
Yeah, and coming into the game, I thought that Alabama was going to be a pretty bad matchup for Villanova because they're just so long and so athletic. Guys like Braxton Key, Herbert Jones, John Petty on the wings. They're like 6'6", 6'7", long arms. But the start of the second half, Villanova just started doing their thing, moving the ball. Mikal Bridges just went off. I know I went to the bathroom at the start of the second half. I came back and 2 minutes were gone, and it was like a 20-point game all of a sudden. So that was crazy. Luckily, Villanova is one of the teams that I still enjoy watching, even when they're blowing people out. So the second half was still fun for me. I don't know if you would turn the game off at this point, but the walk on for Alabama threw like this crazy behind the back pass with like 5 minutes left. I don't know if you saw that, but it was a very impressive pass and very ballsy to try it even in a blowout NCAA tournament game.
I think I saw that highlight. I also saw Sexton's kind of like final play was like he scored it and then he just like started trash talking even though they're down 25. and then just like went to the bench for the final time. And I was like, that dude he's such a competitor. Like, I don't think I've ever watched like a college player who's like a one and done type be so just like crushingly competitive. Like, he gets a 4.0 in the classroom, like a super smart kid, works super hard. That's why I just like don't see him failing in the NBA. Like, I don't know if he's a star, but like he's just gonna work so hard that I just don't see him failing.
Yeah, he's a tough fit because he's not a great distributor and he's very ball dominant, very score first. So I think he kind of fits in that like 8 to 12 range of the draft.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
But moving on to another really entertaining game with Seton Hall and Kansas. I actually had Seton Hall winning this one, and they gave it all they could. Angel Delgado was awesome in this game, had like 24 and 23. He really dominated Mitch Lightfoot and whoever else they put on him. And then Kadeem Carrington was awesome in the second half, was unconscious from three. But ultimately, a down game from Desi Rodriguez and a kind of a down game from Miles Powell. They just didn't have enough to keep up with Kansas's hot shooting. Guys like Malik Newman and Svi Mikhailuk really knocked down open shots and really made this comeback too much to handle for the Pirates.
Yeah, I mean, Seton Hall had that game where they wanted it. You feel like, I mean, obviously they were like on the road playing a tough team. Devontae Graham didn't play well in this ball game, but Malik Newman was awesome. And I mean, it was kind of the story though of Seton Hall's like entire 4-year career with this core of, Carrington's great, Delgado's great, Miles Powell's pretty good, Desi Rodriguez is great, and then after it's like, okay, we got 5 rebounds and 5 fouls from Ish Sanogo. We got some like minutes from Michael Enzi. Miles Cale played. Like they just didn't get anything else. Only had 9 assists in the ball game. Their ball movement wasn't very good. They hit the 10 threes, which allowed them to kind of stick around. But to me, it was kind of more of the same from Seton Hall. And I mean, they're going to be a really interesting team to monitor, this offseason and going forward. They bring in Quincy McKnight next year, who kind of comes in from Sacred Heart. He's a bit of a wild player, but he's a talented guard who can kind of play on or off the ball. So that he's a guy who will help this team. They get Torian Thompson in, who may or may not be good. He can score it, but he's a pretty one-way player, if you will, in terms of his ability to defend or lack thereof. 2 decent recruits coming in, actually 3, and Darnell Brody, Jared Roden, Anthony Nelson, and then they also had Abdul Lewis, a grad transfer from NJIT, visiting yesterday. He'd be kind of a nice fit next to Torian Thompson. It's just like hustler, big guy who he doesn't really have much of a post game, but he's very physical. He's very athletic. So he can kind of just go get rebounds for him, which would be a useful piece. And so I assume they'll be in the market for several grad transfers, trying to kind of put this roster together for next season.
Yeah, Seton Hall is in a really interesting place for next year because I think that they have the pieces where it would not be ridiculous to say that they could make the NCAA tournament. And if they did make the NCAA tournament, that would set them up so well for the future where, even after this great recruiting class has left the program and graduated, they could still maintain a high level of play. That would really speak well to the future. I know I've seen some people say that Kevin Willard might take the Pitt job, which the only way I could see that is if he kind of felt slighted that he was on the hot seat to begin with at Seton Hall before this great recruiting class. So he just kind of wants a fresh start and a fresh, I would say 4 or 5 years, but Kevin Stallings only got 2 years. So I would be careful with making a move like that. And, you have some very good players like Miles Powell, like Miles Cale, who showed a lot in the second half of the year, returning to Seton Hall. I don't know any other particular games that you wanted to touch on. I know Clemson knocked the crap out of Auburn, and some people think that Bruce Pearl could be on the hot seat between the whole NCAA stuff and his past reputation.
Yeah, the Bruce Pearl thing's interesting. I mean, there hasn't been kind of like a Jeff Goodman or John Rothstein report about it, but there's just kind of been this rumbling, from some of those like secondary reporters who aren't necessarily as tied down to the like high levels of journalistic integrity and kind of speak on those those types of rumors that Bruce Pearl's in trouble. So, I mean, we'll take those with what they're worth. I think it's very possible. I think the other team I kind of wanted to touch on was Gonzaga. Not only, I mean, that team did not look good against UNC Greensboro. Greensboro, I think, was the better team in that ball game, but just Gonzaga hung around and won it late. And then that Ohio State game was super entertaining between Gonzaga and Ohio State. Zach Norvell was awesome, 28, 12, and 4. Reminder that he is a freshman and he will be back. Rui Hachimura had 25 points and 5 rebounds in 25 minutes. He's a sophomore. He'll be back. Killian Tilly is probably going to go to the league, I think, but he could come back for one more year. I mean, that was a special ball game, and Keita Bates-Diop was really solid in that one for Ohio State. And this team kind of just went back and forth, and in the end, it was the end for a really good Ohio State team, and the bracket continues to open up for a team like Gonzaga.
Yeah, I thought the Gonzaga Ohio State game was one of the more underrated games of the weekend. And speaking of kind of like their pro prospects for the Zags, I'm not a big Killian Tilly guy. I know he had a hot shooting end of the season, and he's very athletic, but I don't really see him as the NBA first rounder that he's being pegged. So I would not be surprised if he's back for next year. And they also add Brandon Clark, who was the best player for San Jose State, who I believe is like kind of a combo, but more of a 4-man. So Gonzaga's kind of a lot of length and a lot of athleticism next season. I know that Corey Kispert was a guy who had a great first half of the year, and I think he played pretty well in the first 2 games of this tournament. And he's a high upside in the sense that he's going to be there for 4 years, and he was a very highly ranked recruit, and he can really shoot the ball. Not really worried about him leaving early in that sense. So Gonzaga's here to stay, and they could really add another maybe Final Four, maybe even make it to the national championship to kind of build off what they did last season.
Their front court next year is just going to be like beyond scary. So they lose Jonathan Williams, but they'll have Rui, they'll have maybe Tilly, probably not. Zach Norvell's big, but he's more of a wing. They'll have Kispert, who can kind of play anywhere. They'll have Filip Petrusev, who is a 4-star big guy from, I think, Croatia. He was a guy who signed with Hartford, committed to Hartford in like 2015, and then decommitted when their assistant coach, who was Croatian, went to UNC Charlotte, and then blew up as a prospect. It's Serbia, by the way, my bad. But yeah, so Serbian big man, he's really talented, can space the floor. And then Brandon Clark gets kind of forgotten about. This dude was like an 18-10 type of player at San Jose State. Like, he's going to be like unbelievable at Gonzaga next year. So they're a team that I like legitimately could see as a top 5 team. Josh Perkins will be back. Like, this is going to be scary.
And on the opposite side, Ohio State, I think, is in real trouble for next year, where they lose Keita Bates-Diop for the most part. They lose Jayshawn Tate, and those are their 2 best players. And then they lose Cam Williams, who's like a double-digit scorer on the wing, who's a shooter. And the guys that they bring back C.J. Jackson, who's a great player, but he has no offensive help now because Andre Wesson, who is their 6th man, he's not a scorer. He's kind of like a glue guy. He'll slide in at the 4, and his brother Caleb Wesson showed a lot of promise as a freshman, but he's like a big-bodied 5-man. He's like 6'10", like 280 or 290. So he gets played off the floor by some teams. I know against South Dakota State, you couldn't really use him. So that's a limited front court right there. And then the rest is going to be all freshmen. Guys like Kyle Young, who's a top 100 recruit, former Butler signee who came over with Chris Holtmann. He failed to make an impact. And then they have some solid recruits like Luther Muhammad's like a defensive-minded combo guard. I know Dwayne Washington is a scoring guard, but overall this team is going to lack the talent that they had this year.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see, because they do have four 4-stars already committed. They're in on Courtney Ramey. I think Holtmann went to see him the other day while the other conference tournaments were going on. He's another talented guard who could really help them. They do lose their best player in Andrew Dockich. He's a superstar. I don't think we should ever question Andrew Dockich again. It's incredible, like to watch people on Twitter just talk about Andrew Dockich. Like it's fun in and of itself just to watch that go down. I think they'll be okay. Their front court's gonna be thin, as you said. Bates Diop's probably gone, as you said. It's gonna be tough. I feel like they're gonna go grad transfer for a big man. It certainly would make sense, and so I'm not gonna bet against Chris Holtmann. Let's kind of put it that way. But like as you said, though, they do lose a good amount of talent.
I forgot to mention Musa Jallo too, who actually showed some flashes this year on the wing. But one grad transfer that they will definitely go after is the kid from Evansville. I think his name is Ryan Taylor. He's like a 20 plus point per game scorer. He would be a nice fit, add some offense to that backcourt.
It was so funny. Jeff Goodman tweeted out like the kid from Evansville's like early hearing from list, and it was like, every single school. Let me try to find the tweet. It was really funny. Yeah, he has heard from Butler, Northwestern. Please go to Northwestern, Ryan Taylor. Vandy, South Carolina, Ohio State, Ole Miss, Wisconsin, Oklahoma, Illinois, Georgetown, Creighton, Minnesota, BC, Indiana, UCLA, Arizona, Wake Forest, Miami, Purdue, Baylor, Maryland, and Missouri.
So he's going to have some options.
Yeah. My question is, who is he hearing from Ole Miss when Kermit Davis was still coaching Middle Tennessee State yesterday?
That's a very good point.
Was Kermit just recruiting already for Ole Miss? Like, I guess that's possible. I mean, it'll be interesting. I don't. He's going to go wherever he wants. He's 22 points a game and can shoot the ball. Like he's 6'5". Like he's going to go wherever he would like to go. Brad, any more games we really wanted to get into on this one?
I would like to mention. So I've grown a fondness and a liking for people that blatantly like to spin facts in their favor or spin arguments in their favor. And one of the more ridiculous ones from the weekend, I screenshotted it on my phone. I will bring it up right now. We have St. Bonaventure's win over UCLA is more proof that the committee should have picked Middle Tennessee or St. Mary's for the other play-in game instead of Arizona State or Syracuse. This was tweeted on March 13th. So St. Bonaventure barely beat UCLA. They looked pretty bad in that game. It was an ugly game. And I don't see why St. Bonaventure's win means anything about Middle Tennessee or St. Mary's because they're completely different teams. And Syracuse is now in the Sweet 16. Another one I saw was, Marshall beat Wichita State, and people were saying because Marshall won, that meant that Middle Tennessee State should have been in. The bending over backwards for Middle Tennessee State is absolutely insane. Not even like because a team in their conference won a game in a random tournament, they deserve to be in. So then I had tweeted like, Syracuse now in the Sweet 16. It looks like that they deserve to be in. And rightfully, I got, someone who said, well, them winning games doesn't mean that they were rightfully included, which is 100% accurate. But I've never seen anyone say that or bring that up to someone who's saying that because Marshall won in the random single elimination tournament, then Middle Tennessee State should have been in.
Yeah, I don't think people really understand how the committee works. Like, the committee isn't supposed to hit quotas of mid-majors. Like, the teams that get in are the ones that deserve to get in. Like Middle Tennessee State, you watch them; they're a tournament team, but their resume was thin. Like, same thing with St. Mary's, and St. Mary's openly avoided playing good teams. Like at some point, I just don't feel any sympathy for St. Mary's, and I'd love to see those teams in, but their resumes just didn't stand up. So kind of done with that whole argument. It's just kind of I don't think people really understand what's going on with the committee. I did want to bring up one thing before we kind of sign off on this podcast, and it was this thread I found from this guy named Brett Coromainos. I don't know if you saw it, Brad.
No.
It was like a 40 tweet thread. It was kind of incredible. It was basically a criticism of the entire it was basically talking about how people are using UMBC's win as a referendum on UVA's style of play. but that we should really look at Marshall's win over Wichita State as a referendum on like how mid majors can beat high major teams going forward, and this like inefficiency in college basketball of like right now teams that are going to pull upsets are teams that can like have a couple of super high level players who can like space the floor, play spread, pick and roll like the NBA and hit threes. And it's like beyond just like the typical approach of like, oh, let's get, well, let's build, teams who can hit threes can win NCAA tournament games. It's like, teams that don't understand that like a post up is the lowest percentage play in terms of points per possession in college basketball. And like in the NBA, there's this knowledge of like when a coach starts playing post ups instead of spacing the floor and shooting threes, people start criticizing the coach. But in college, people are like, oh, look at this great team at posting up. And like this kind of referendum on the idea of, the way to win is to build like Marshall has, where you have a great lead guard and a guy who can play pick and pop and pick and roll with him. So John Elmore, a Gene Penova, and then, just move the ball like crazy and hit open shots. And that's how you're going to beat high majors. Kind of looking at it from a points per possession standpoint. Brad, I don't know if you found the thread. It's pretty ridiculously long, and you probably couldn't have read it while I was talking, but I just thought it was pretty interesting. Any kind of thoughts on this, on the modern NBA looks kind of entering college basketball? I will say that, Nevada plays a very much open pace and space style. The same could be said about Loyola. Both teams having success. Marshall won a game. UMBC did a great job of floor spacing. Kind of what are your thoughts there on kind of like a more, possession points per possession basis of looking at college basketball?
Yeah, I definitely think that that's accurate, especially when you look at the teams like Buffalo's another team that had the talented lead guard in Wes Clark. And they had a bunch of kind of versatile athletes like Massenberg and Harris who could, shoot threes or even take your guy off the dribble. I think it is kind of convenient though. Like any team that hits shots is going to have a chance to win. Like Buffalo, I don't think was a great 3-point shooting team. I know I watched them play during the regular season. I think they were playing like Western Michigan. Western Michigan was like letting them shoot. They were going under ball screens. So I mean, Buffalo gets a little hot and shoots some threes, and they look like a completely different team. And while I know the numbers and the evidence behind why the post up is bad, I do think it's not something that should be eliminated, because the goal is to put the ball in the basket, and if you have guys that can post up and score, I wouldn't run your offense through it. But it is effective when you have guys that can do it. I think the problem is teams that are giving post touches to bigs that can't post up. I know like Purdue has a lot of success giving Haas post touches where he can also pass out of the post. Same with Jock Landale on St. Mary's. But like Syracuse isn't giving Pascal Chukwu any post touches. Michigan State shouldn't give like Gavin Schilling any post touches. But I think it's more situational. And if a team is to pull off an upset when they have inferior talent, they are going to need to hit shots.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it kind of speaks to the concept of right now, like if you're a mid-major team, I don't think you can recruit. Like obviously you can't recruit at the level of a high major, with the exception of like maybe like a Nevada who plays in a high-level conference who can, recruit transfers from high-level conferences. You just can't really do it. So how do you overcome that? And I think spacing's the great equalizer, and having great guards who can shoot it is the great equalizer. Obviously, it depends, as you said, with guys like Landale and Haas, their points per possession on a post touch are probably a lot higher. I don't have the stats in front of me. I have to go on like Synergy or something like that. But their points per possession on a post touch is probably significantly higher than that 0.8 that Dan D'Antoni highlights, because he basically went on the rant like in his presser where it was like, why do you play this style? And it was like, it's 1.8 points per possession shooting a three from the corner. And like 1.3, and like, so like the only shot we'd rather more than a corner three is an uncontested layup or a dunk.
Yeah, because right. So if you shoot 40% from three, you need to shoot 61% from a post up for the post up to be more efficient, right? Because 1.25 or 1.5 times 40 is 60. So, I mean, 40% is a good clip from three, and not every team can shoot that. So, you know, you don't necessarily have to play the same way, but you need to shoot 1.5 times better from a post up or from a mid range than three to make up for the lack of that 1 point.
Exactly. Yeah, it's interesting stuff, and I think a lot of coaches do need to embrace the analytical side of basketball, whether it's, you know, from that side or, you know, looking at matchups. I know a couple of teams. I know Wisconsin and Seattle hired Eric Haslam to kind of be a consultant throughout the season, kind of look to give them a scouting report on an analytical side. I think that's just something that we're going to see more and more, you know, going forward. And I think Eric does a great job with that. I know Seattle and Wisconsin both had, you know, decent seasons. Wisconsin, especially down the stretch, started to heat up. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting to watch kind of this development and how many teams do really change their philosophy. But I mean, it definitely does give me pause. You know, when you talk about Michigan State, the amount of post touches they give to Nick Ward, and obviously he's really good down there, but when you have the opportunity to play Jaren Jackson at the 5, Miles Bridges at the 4, Josh Langford, Matt McQuaid, and Cassius Winston, and have guys who can attack, guys who can space the floor and shoot threes, play 5 out and space it out, you kind of wonder, you know, playing in the same way that Marshall maybe does with Elmore and Penova, could you do kind of a similar thing with Jaren Jackson and Penova's role in either Cash Winston or Miles Bridges in that Elmore role of being a primary ball handler?
Yeah, I mean, you know, Michigan State has, you know, I know that Tom Izzo really likes to play Tum Tum Nairn. I mean, you could play Tum Tum and Winston together with Langford, Bridges, and Jackson. I mean, a lot of teams play 2 point guards, and even though that they're small, you know, they're both, you know, very, very quick, and they can get into you defensively. So, I think Izzo is the most glaring case this year of just being tied down too much to, you know, playing two bigs.
Yep, I would say them in Arizona, and I think both are headed home now. I mean, Arizona had DeAndre Ayton, who is built like Shaquille O'Neal. He's just absolutely shredded. I don't think anyone can stop him in the post, and yet they spend half their season playing him at the 4 and having him shoot mid-range jump shots, which is, you know, by points per possession, one of the worst shots in college basketball. And so, I mean, it's going to be interesting to watch this kind of development. And I don't really know what Dusan Richstich did for you other than just be like a solid leader and rebounder. But the fact that Sean Miller didn't really even try just kind of makes me question stuff. And I think we'll certainly see over the next few years which teams develop, because I mean, the modern NBA, everything takes time to embrace. I would say the modern NBA thing only happened like 3 years ago. So like there's plenty of time for there to be an adjustment for the warriorification of college basketball.
Yeah, I remember about a couple months ago, I was watching Celtics highlights from when they won the championship, and it just looks like a totally different sport. I mean, they won only Ray Allen was shooting threes, and you know, it was just Pierce and Garnett shooting long twos repeatedly, and like Kendrick Perkins getting post touches. It just was jarring. It was absolutely jarring how different the sport has looked over the past 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty unreal, and I think it's going to change, you know, even more as we go forward. We're going to preview the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight on a podcast probably Wednesday or Thursday, and have that to you guys. We just kind of figured in order to do that justice, we also wanted to be able to do this justice in this first weekend. So we'll split it up into 2 podcasts. Thanks as always for listening. Brad, do we have anything else we wanted to touch on before we sign off on this episode of the CBB Central podcast?
Nothing too crazy. Obviously, there were games and teams that we couldn't touch on just because of how many different notable events that there were. But hopefully, we'll get to everybody in the Sweet 16 preview as there are less games.
Yes, indeed. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. Hope you enjoyed your just incredible weekend of college basketball. I'm still kind of shaken up by some of these games, and it's just going to be it's going to be fun to watch the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight. I know a lot of times people talk about, oh, like early upset make the Sweet 16 less intriguing, but I'm still very, very excited for that, and I'm sure Brad is too. Once again, thanks for listening, everybody, and have a great day.